He does a lot in the community. He had a bad lapse in judgment, and that's it. But I'm still a Myles Garrett fan, and I'm going to support him. Our organization's going to support him, and his teammates will support him, and this coaching staff will support him.
All right, loyalty, you just heard the deal. Freddie Kitchen says the Browns will continue to support Garrett while also not excusing the star defensive end for his actions Thursday against Pittsburgh. The NFL suspended Garrett indefinitely for ripping the helmet off quarterback Mason Rudolph and clubbing him in the head with it in the final seconds of the game. Our Adam Schefter reported that Garrett's appeal of his indefinite suspension will be heard Wednesday morning. Dan Orlovsky here with us now. Good to see you, Dan. Max, I'll start with you.
Sure.
Is Garrett taking too much heat for this incident?
Way too much. People were talking about sending him to jail. Look, let's really look at what happened on that play. Mason Rudolph, who was getting his hat handed to him, let's say, all day and was awful, wound up, they were trying a passing play with 8 seconds left in the game. The defensive end wound up on top of him, right? People could call it a late hit, although I don't know. Could he see that the ball was, Anyway, the point is, Mason Rudolph didn't like it. He started tussling with Myles Garrett. He tried to pull his helmet off, really tried hard, got his hand under there. He kicked him in the groin. Myles Garrett was like, wait, you are now bringing our helmets into it? Okay, fine. If we're going to try and take each other's helmets off. And he took Mason Rudolph's helmet off, and then he was restrained. Now, could Myles Garrett have hit Mason Rudolph with a helmet if Mason Rudolph was 10 yards away? Did he throw it at him? No. Mason Rudolph, without his helmet now, charged at Myles Garrett. So either he's lost his impulse control and is seeing red, or he knows he's trying to manipulate the situation, take advantage of the fact I don't have my helmet on. What's he going to do to me, right? At any rate, Myles Garrett in that moment, it's not premeditated. It's not had a helmet in his hand and almost used it like it didn't seem to me like I'm going to crack his skull open. It seemed to me like it's an extension. I'm going to try to hit this guy who's charging at me. It's a lapse in judgment. There's an impulse control issue, but in that moment. But in any adjudication, character witnesses matter. Everyone's coming out and telling you who knows him. This is a good kid. It's a good guy. One, not premeditated, not a history of this stuff. One isolated incident where he did the wrong thing. I could see sitting him even for the rest of the season. Mason Rudolph just got a fine. By the way, I mentioned it when this first happened. It's in the rules book what happens if you use the helmet as a weapon. It's 15 yards, and you're disqualified from the game. In this case, because the other guy doesn't have a helmet, I understand a much stiffer penalty. But the penalty is actually, they account for this in the books. It's not the guy goes to jail. It's not he can't play again. It's not he can't play for a season. It's 15 yards and disqualified from the rest of the game. There's been an hysterical overreaction to Myles Garrett.
You're right if we're talking about idiots out there that wanted assault charges filed against him, thrown in jail and all of this nonsense. That's ridiculous, okay? But in terms of it being strictly confined to the NFL's jurisdiction, he deserved to be suspended for the rest of the season. You cannot take the helmet off of a quarterback and knock him upside the head with it and think you should play the rest of the season. It's just that simple. You have to take everything into consideration. The NFL has gone about the business of religiously, some would say excessively, prioritizing protecting the quarterback, primarily from headshots. This is with legal plays. I'm talking about you go after the pass, you go after the passer, the quarterback might duck a little bit, trying to brace himself for a hit. Your helmet connects with them, you're automatically penalized, for crying out loud, because come hell or high water, you have to avoid headshots to the quarterback. Now, what does Myles Garrett do? It is 8 seconds left in the game. It's over. You're up 21-7. You have been beating the quarterback up all evening long. Got 10 sacks on the season. You also got a couple of roughing the passer penalties. By the way, you ended Trevor Siemian's season with a roughing the passer call against you and what have you. But that's neither here nor there. The game's over. You've been beating him up all evening long. And on this particular play, you tackle him, you get him to the ground. Did Mason Rudolph act appropriately? I don't think so.
Do you think he should be punished?
I think he should have been suspended the game. I think
Right, me too.
I think Mason Rudolph should have been suspended the game.
Agreed.
But what I'm saying to people is that can't take precedent or priority over the stupidity on the part of Myles Garrett. Because of the moment, game was over. It was unnecessary. And then last but not least, knowing the history of the National Football League, recent history, when it comes to protecting a quarterback, specifically from headshots, you take off his helmet and then you knock him upside the head with
Slide,
it.
brother. Don't go for the extra yard. You won't get hit.
They should have updated the rule before this happened.
Again.
That Max mentioned, the 15-yard rule.
Yeah, I got it. But what I'm saying is you took his helmet off, and even though he was coming at you or whatever, you were shielded by 2 offensive linemen, but still felt the need to swing a haymaker right with his helmet, and you ended up...
His boys are on you, and he's charging you.
But again, his boys are on you, but they're also blocking and impeding his path to you, too. You did not have to throw a haymaker with his helmet and knock him upside the head.
In those piles.
That's what comes with it.
Quarterback, you've had guys hunting you down. What are your thoughts?
I think it was Mike Krzyzewski who said it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and a moment to ruin it. Take the lapse of judgment stuff and throw it away. That is a bunch of crap. You know how many people have had to say, I had a lapse of judgment, and it literally has ruined their life? Like, totally affected their life? The lapse of judgment is not an excuse. It's not an excuse. Myles Garrett, if he gets a suspension that lasts the rest of the season, should be thankful. That he should be thankful that that is the worst case scenario.
He instigated it.
But he should be thankful that because that's the worst punishment he's going to get. He's 3 or 4 inches away from a completely different scenario. That the lapse of judgment doesn't ruin his life. Literally, because he's 3 or 4 inches away from breaking a face, busting open an eye, hitting it on a temple. And then the suspension is the least of his worries. It's the least of his worries.
Well, that's why he gets a very stiff 6-game suspension.
And he should be and accept that and be thankful that
Thankful
that's
that
the
he
great.
didn't do more damage.
Yeah, are you kidding me?
Okay.
Because there's plenty of people that we have had in our lives, and they say I had a lapse of judgment, and that lapse of judgment has had profound impact on their life, not just a 4-month stretch. So the fact of Mason Rudolph should have been penalized as well because he's part of an ugly scene that the NFL has. But for him to be like trying to appeal it, you're fortunate that your lapse of judgment doesn't have long-term profound impact on your life and everyone else that was involved in it. So be thankful that that's the most severe punishment you get.
If you start a fight and then you bring baseball bats into it, and then you get yours taken away, and then you charge the guy with the baseball bat, if you get hit with a baseball bat, you pay a stupid tax. Let me explain something.
That's not the question,
Hold on, Dan. It was not. I hear what you're saying. You're appealing a suspension. I understand why he's appealing it, but you're saying you should be thankful that your behavior didn't have a worse outcome.
Yes.
And learn some kind of a lesson from that. Oh, fine. It was not Myles Garrett's plan to take the helmet off of Mason Rudolph.
Sure.
It was Mason Rudolph's
Agreed.
plan. It was not Myles Garrett's plan to continue the fight. That was Mason Rudolph's plan. The unintended consequence of Mason Rudolph's instigating and aggressive and continuing to be aggressive behavior was he almost wound up in a really bad situation.
Correct.
Now we're framing Myles Garrett as the perpetrator. And while I agree a loss of impulse in a pivotal moment can ruin your life, in fact, that's what Myles Garrett is guilty of. And the only thing he's guilty of is an impulse, a bad impulse in a bad moment that could have had big ramifications. But Mason Rudolph is the guy who planned it. It's like premeditated every step of the way. He started it, he instigated it, he elevated it, he continued it. And Myles Garrett's the bad guy.
You think Mason Rudolph pre-planned this all? Like,
no, I'm not saying I'm going to get Myles Garrett.
He lost control of himself, and if Myles Garrett dropped that helmet and punched him in the face, I would have been like,
final points here, guys.
That's on you. He's fortunate that the long-term ramifications aren't what they could have been. So accept the consequences of your action.
Stephen A.
Accept the consequences of your action. You threw a haymaker with the helmet and connected on his head in a time where you're doing all you can to protect quarterbacks from headshots. It's really that simple. I don't think he should be cited as a criminal. Like people acting like he should be thrown in jail. It's stupid. It's nonsense. We haven't seen that. Myles Garrett doesn't deserve that. But you do deserve the 6 games for throwing a haymaker with a helmet and connecting with
Quarterback doesn't want to get hit, slide, don't go for the extra yard. Mason Rudolph kept going for the extra yard, and eventually he got hit. It doesn't exonerate Myles Garrett.
Make up your mind. Make up your mind.
About
But
what?
if the quarterback
Do you
slides, you
think
hit
he
him in the head,
deserves
it's still
6 games or
penalty.
don't?
I would, on the outside, the stiffest penalty he could possibly get, 6 games.
Period.
I'll go with 6
All
games.
right.
Period.
And you all said Mason Rudolph deserves to be suspended a game as well. He received a fine. Stephen A says Colin Kaepernick eradicated his points by changing his